All right. Welcome back to Faith Family, United Church of Christ, Studies in Acts, or Study in Acts. Today we're going to close everything up. We're doing the last two chapters, chapter 27 and 28 of Acts. So let's just jump right into that and get going. Okay, as you remember, Paul was in prison, right? Herod had heard him. Before that, we had Felix, was the new governor of the area, and before Felix was Festus. Okay.
King.
Yeah, King Agrippa. So, remember how long he was there? When Festus left, he left him in prison for 2 years, and then when Felix come, Felix listened to him, and he's still in prison. And finally, he's going to finally go to Rome to be in front of the emperor's court, and that's where we have. When it starts out 27, when it was decided that we were to sail for Italy, of course Rome, they transferred Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. Okay. It's really interesting. And one of the things that a good seminary will teach pastors and teachers, look at everything that's being said there. Okay? Did you notice when it was decided that who? Paul? No. It says we. So that usually means that the author is with them, right?
We boarded a ship.
Yeah, we were there. We boarded a ship. So why is that important? Well, it kind of shows the privilege that Paul had, right? You remember he was about ready to be flogged, and he says, "Are you going to flog a Roman citizen without hearing his case?" And then everybody went, wait a minute, what's going on here? He's a Roman citizen. We can't do this. We can't punish him without a good trial and everything first. So, and here we have Paul is in prison, but there's a we. Could you imagine what would it be like if our prison system today, if your families could come and stay with you and bring you food and bring everything that you needed? Well, now, granted, the prisons back then, they didn't provide you 3 hot meals a day and kind of like they do in the prisons today. But still, having the companionship of your family with you in prison, that's a privilege. And that's a privilege that Paul has because he is a Roman citizen. So I think that to us, we kind of overlook things like that. We kind of overlook our privileges in life, right? I mean, I'm a middle-aged, white, cisgender man. There's a lot of privilege in that, right? People don't necessarily right off the bat question what I'm saying, whereas a woman or someone that has come out as obviously open in their sexuality, or someone of color, there's always that doubt in the back of the mind of some people that, does this person really know what they're talking about? Wonder where they went that got educated. There's things like that. Whereas it's hard for us to see our own privileges, and we overlook them. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of just glossed over right here. In one word, we, So Paul has privileges even though he's in prison. Okay.
And does it have anything to do with a prison system now where they have conjugal visits, where they have a husband can have his wife come over?
Well, that was the thing back then. Back then, if you were in that privileged, they pretty much lived with you. Kind of like You ever seen the movies about Napoleon? Where he's exiled. His prison was an island. Yeah, he had the whole island to himself. And well, it wasn't himself. There was a colony there of other prisoners and stuff. But still, it wasn't like, here you're locked behind this bar, this 12 by 12 cell for 16 hours, and you get out to eat and do a little exercise. It wasn't anything like that. So the prison systems have evolved into what they are today, which is a lot worse than, well, I can't say that because, there was anarchy in prisons like that back then. Anyway, so moving on, Paul goes to Rome, and notice what it says in verse 10. Verse 10, saying, this is Paul talking, "Sir, I can see the voyage will be with danger and much heavy loss, not only to the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives." But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and the owner of the ship than what Paul said. Now, they're traveling at a time that the weather's kind of iffy, probably in the wintertime. And the weather in there, a lot of people didn't travel on these ships in 1 AD, right? They didn't travel on ships in the wintertime. A lot of them docked. Only when it was necessary to go, they did it in the wintertime. And Paul's pointing this out. And the pilot was confident, and the owners wanted to make money. And so the centurion said, "Let's go." What do you think about that? Why is it that people are always skeptical when people give a warning, right? We see that in the world today. There's global warming. Oh, there's not global warming. It happens like this all the time. There's what else is there? People are warning about.
It's not consistent with their plan. They have a plan and they don't, or they have an ideal or a belief that they hold.
Okay.
So they overestimate they're overconfident in their own abilities.
It's not going to affect me.
There's two sides to everything, too.
Of course. But Paul is not held in high esteem where the pilot and the guy trying to make money, the owner, gets a bigger voice. Isn't that true in today's world? The guy with the more money has a bigger voice? Okay, so they go on, and there's a storm at the sea. And things are getting bad. As a matter of fact, they're starting to throw all the cargo overboard. There went the prophet, right? They throw the cargo overboard. And then, notice it says, they also threw the ship's tackle overboard. Now, ship's tackle, that's stuff to bring the ship in, to raise all that stuff, too much weight, boom, overboard. We'd rather not sink today and deal with getting more stuff tomorrow than sinking right now.
Has anybody estimated how big this ship is and how many people were on it?
Yeah, there is a thing that says how many people it's.
176 people.
It's a big boat.
Where is it?
In chapter 35 through 38, at first it says, when he broke the bread, there was 276 of them.
Yeah, 37. We were in all 276 is what I got.
Yeah, me too, I
Put
said it wrong.
276 people in a room this size.
Yeah. Pretty crowded. I was surprised that they threw that stuff overboard before they threw some of the prisoners overboard,
Well, think about it too. Before that, Paul said, God sent an angel to tell me that this ship's going to wreck.
Yeah.
And of course, they didn't believe him, but then when the weather starts getting bad.
Okay. So that's important because I got another thing to point out here coming up. But right now I wanted to point out that it says, neither sun nor stars appeared for many days. This storm was bad. You know, one of those storms that it's always overcast and there's always rain, and sounds like a hurricane, doesn't it? They threw all the things on the ship overboard. Have you ever been in a situation like that? Well, a situation where you're like, the most important thing is my survival, and everything else go away. All your
You may have that.
belongings or something.
I'm sure there's people in situations like that, but I've
Never been in. Yeah, I said we didn't heed the warning, and when we are in peril, we offload what we need, and we just keep what we need to survive. In other words, everything can be thrown overboard, you know, to lighten the loads, to make sure this ship doesn't get swamped and sink. So the tackle, all the cargo, and then at the end of that story, in verse 38, it says, they lightened the ship by throwing the wheat into the. Now they're down to the food that they need to keep traveling, and they're like, boom, this is gone too. We're not there yet, so let me back up. Okay, so Paul points out in verse 21, men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete. Oh, that's a good one. What do you think about that? Isn't that something? There you go. That's what I wrote down too. Told you so. You know, you didn't listen to me. And now we're in this predicament. And it's hard. Sometimes when you tell people about something and it comes to happen and they didn't listen to you, you want to say that, don't you? But Paul's in the same predicament they're in. So what do you do?
Paul's also an evangelist.
Oh, yeah.
He says, well, we're not going to dwell on that. God told me everybody's going to survive, so
Yes,
let's
yes.
focus on that.
And so, as a matter of fact, right before they throw all the wheat overboard, Paul gathers them around. He says, listen, you've been fighting this storm. Let's go ahead and get something to eat. Give ourselves some strength to continue on. And then, after they eat, everything else goes overboard. Okay. So, now we're at the shipwreck. They did not recognize the land, but they hit a reef, and they struck the bow and remained immovable. And now the waves are kind of just bashing against it, driving it further and further into the reef and destroying the ship. And everybody jumps overboard and tries to swim to shore. And I want to point this out in verse 42. The soldiers guarding all the prisoners and everything, plan was to kill the prisoners so that none of them might swim away and escape.
They tried to.
But the centurion wished to save Paul. Ain't that something? And all that happened, the centurion somehow found Paul to be a likable guy. And whatever Paul was saying in all these days that they're on the sea, he got that centurion's ear. And probably because, hey, he said it was going to happen and it happened, maybe we need to stick close to this guy. So At that point, it's kind of like God's grace came in there, made sure Paul was safe, because he has more plans for Paul. And so they get ashore. Now, where did they go to shore? I know you know. But the island that they went ashore on is called Malta. Okay, that's starting in chapter 28. I was telling Jackie a little bit about Malta. Malta is a little island in between Africa and Italy. You know, Italy has the little boot. It looks like it's kicking whatever, that little island there. Well, just south of that is the island of Malta and Gozo. And it's just two little islands. Gozo is a smaller island. But Malta is famous because of the Knights Templars were given Malta as when they came back from the Crusades and the wars in the Holy Land. They come back, and as I was telling Jackie, you know, the kings are like, they've got these knights, and they've got armies of people with them, and they're coming to my kingdom. You know what? Let's send them someplace else. And they decided that, you know, hey, we'll give you Malta. And they exiled them there because they had armies and they feared them, right? I mean, what have they been doing in the Holy Land? You know, they haven't been peaceful in there. They've been, you know, doing what armies do. What?
Raping and pillaging.
So they didn't want that in there, so they gave them, as Cindy said, exiled them to Malta. And one of the things that they had to do, and this is the Maltese falcon, right? Once a year they had to give a falcon, because the Knights Templars were also falconers. You know, they hunt with falcons. So they that was kind of their price that they had to pay, was they had to give one falcon. They called it the Maltese falcon, and that's where we get that term, the Maltese falcon. Interesting, huh? Yes. It's a you know, they
Carrion,
yeah, no,
No,
it's
not a carrion, it's a hawk.
yeah, like a hawk, and they hunt with them. You know, they hunt rabbits and bigger game too. So they train them to go and grab the rabbit and bring it back to you. So kind of like a dog, but only it's a bird. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Anyway, so the island that they crashed on was Malta, and then the natives, it says here, were very hospitable and very unusual kindness. They took care of them, and it was raining, still raining, and so they built a fire for them. And when they gathered the firewood and they threw it in the fire, a viper, a snake, comes out because of the heat and latches on to Paul's arm. And everybody thinks Paul's dead. Okay. But Paul doesn't die. Paul doesn't even get sick. And it's like, oh, what's going on here? And they, first of all, they go back to their religion and their superstitions, and they start saying, Paul is a god. This happened before to Paul, right? When Paul and Barnabas were preaching, and they called them Zeus and Apollo, or Apollo and someone else. I can't remember now. But, you know, this is the Gentile. This is their religion. This is what Paul is trying to come to and teach them about God. And they're trying to call Paul God because of his the miracles that he's done. And here's another one. And then later it says, Paul visited, this is one of the elders of the land. He visited him and cured him by praying and put his hands on him. After this had happened, the rest of the people on the island who had diseases also were cured, came to him and were cured. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Snake bites him, he doesn't get sick. Lays hands on people, and they're cured. Let me turn over here to John chapter 16. Starting at verse 18. And it says, Jesus is giving them, this is John's Great Commission, where Jesus is sending the disciples out. And he says, they keep asking, what does this mean by a little while? Wait a minute. Oh, I'm sorry. I got that backwards, didn't I? I wrote that down backwards. Well, now I'm all confused. Somebody read me John 16:18.
The disciples, confused, questioned to Jesus, asking for clarification.
So they kept asking, what does he mean by a little while? We don't understand what he is saying.
Well,
What are you looking for?
the verse where it says that they will handle snakes and not be harmed, they will,
Mark 16:18.
oh, Mark. Oh, it does say Mark. Okay, my bad. That makes sense now. Mark 16:18, yes. I was so convinced, I convinced myself that it was in John, and it says right here on my paper, Mark 16:18. Okay, so Mark 16:18, which says, 15 says, go into all the world and preach the good news to all creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons, they will speak in new tongues, they will pick up snakes with their hands, and when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on the sick, and they will get well. Isn't that what Paul just did here? He handled a snake, he laid his hands, and everybody got well. So it's kind of like, remember the main emphasis, one of the main emphasis on the book of Acts was to put Paul on equal status with the other apostles. Peter, John, and James, right? Everybody knows them because they're in the Gospels. Well, Acts is going to say, well, hey, you know all those letters that have been written by this guy Paul? Well, here's his story too, and you can see he's an apostle just like all the others. So, and this is just kind of points to that. He is a believer, and he's able to do these things that Jesus predicted that the believers would be able to do. All right. So that's Paul landing on Malta. Now Paul, 3 months later, they get in a ship and they go to Rome. They're going to Rome. And they stay at a place called, can you see what that is in verse 15? The believers from there, in other words, there's already Christians living in there. Or at the time they might have been Jewish converts, but they're living there near Rome or in Rome. When they heard of us, came as far as the Forum of Appius and 3 taverns to meet us. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that, I said, taverns? What? That's what I thought. But we're talking something different here. Back in this time, a tavern, it's not necessarily a bar as much as it's an inn, a place where you can stay, a place where you can get a meal, basically a place where people can gather together. All right? And see, this is one of the places where the first Christians were gathering, was in an inn. Have you ever heard of church in a bar?
I think it's really important to point out here that at this point, Paul's been missing for a long time. He's been in prison.
Yep.
He's been lost at sea. He's been in Malta for 3. So when he got there, it was like the Christians living there were being persecuted.
Oh,
And it was like he's arrived. It was kind of like when Jesus came into Jerusalem, or when John anointed Jesus. It was like a moment in history when people could point back to and say, "This is where our faith was revived."
yes. And go ahead.
Have you written any letters?
That's what I was just going to say. At this point, all of Paul's letters have already been written, right? Paul dies in roughly about 65. The book of Acts isn't written until nearly 100. So the letters are out there, right? And you know that the letters are out there, and some of these people are seeing them, and now they have a chance to meet the guy that's writing those letters. And that's what Luke here in this chapter of Acts is selling. Hey, the people know about Paul, and they're coming to see him because they want to understand what their faith is all about. All right? So they believe that the Messiah has come, but what does that mean for us? And so how important this is, like Cindy said, they've already started getting persecuted and different things. And so here's Paul. Let's go see Paul. Let's see what we can do. Okay. And then Paul, what does Paul do? Come on. Everybody should know this. Same thing Jesus did. Where did Jesus go on Saturday morning? He went to the Jewish community, right? Can you imagine going to someone just cold turkey and saying to them, "Hey, let me tell you about God." Well, what's God? And so that's the kind of thing that he had to deal with by going to the Gentiles. So he basically goes to the Jewish community and then works his way out from that, because those people are familiar with the Jewish understanding of God and those things. And so he has a place to begin with and to reach out to them. And that's exactly what Paul does here. He goes to the Jewish community, calls the local leaders of the Jews together, and what do?
Nobody's ever told us about you. We didn't know you were coming. Nobody came here and said.
Nobody. We haven't heard anything about you. Why are you in prison? Why are these things happening? Please tell us. And they were open-minded enough. I thought that was really cool. They were open-minded enough to listen to him. And I think that's important, because what did Jesus say when you go to a place and they do not receive you? Shake the dust off your feet and keep going. Because if they're not going to listen to you, they're not going to listen to you. Right? And so Paul goes to some place where the people will listen to him. He preaches to them, and they say, "You know what? This is interesting. Come back and tell us more about what you're..." So here, the Jewish leaders were of a noble character, as it says in Acts 11:10. The Bereans were of more noble character than the Thessalonians, because they received what we had to tell them with eagerness, but they studied the Scriptures to make sure that what I said was true. Now that's noble, not just tuning somebody out because they're telling you something different than what you've always learned. So the Jewish leaders, they're listening to Paul. Paul's in prison, and Paul preaches in Rome. Once again, this is Paul's under arrest. He's in prison, which is basically, he's got a house. He's got his friends living there. He just can't go anywhere, right? He's still in chains. But everybody that comes and everybody around him is going to hear the word. It says that he,
Talk day and night.
yes. The very last sentence, 31, proclaiming the kingdom of God and teaching about the Lord Jesus Christ with all boldness and without hindrance. Isn't that something? Think about that. What would you do if you were just arrested right now, thrown in prison, and but you didn't know if you were ever going to get out? Would you be able to say that I preached Jesus, that I preached the Christ, that I preached the message of love and compassion, grace and forgiveness without hindrance? I'm in jail, for crying out loud. I can't go do what I want. But those that were there, he was able to preach to them. Under house arrest. Under house arrest. So I think that that's really, really cool. God has sent me to the Gentiles. They will listen. That's verse 28. The Gentiles, they will listen. I think that's...
Before that, they were talking, and some people believed and some didn't. They got into kind of some arguments and everything. And he quoted Isaiah and said, some people are just going to put their fingers in their ears and not listen.
Yep.
But other people will receive us with open arms. He said, Paul pretty much said, I'm done with the Jews.
Yes, yeah. And we've already seen this earlier. He was claiming to be the apostle to the Gentiles, even though he goes to the Jewish. But you got to get a foothold. You got to get a foothold with the people before you can just go in there and tell them. Go ahead.
And his foothold was Isaiah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what he did. He said, look, Isaiah told you that someone was coming.
Yes.
And that you wouldn't listen.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about Paul. And that's why Paul was such the right person for this. He studied under Gamaliel, a very prominent teacher of the law. And here he was climbing the ladder, the social ladder of the rabbis or whatever. And then he had a vision and he realized, hey, this is the fulfillment of everything that I've ever studied. And so he goes from there to knowing the law. He's able to point to everything, kind of like what I'm doing in my sermons, right? I'm doing what the Jewish call midrash. And what that is they read the scripture and then someone stands up and they said, oh, that's like this. And they give an explanation. Basically, it's a sermon, just like we do a lot of times with the New Testament, and we do it with the Old Testament as well. But we read a passage and we give a sermon based on that. That's what Paul was doing. That's what Jesus did when it says he went into the synagogue and he read scripture and then he talked to them about it. Okay? So that's what Paul is doing. That's why he goes to that. And he's able to point out that, hey, in the law it says Isaiah right here. Now, the people that are die-hard Jewish and you're crazy, Paul, aren't going to believe him. But those people that are open-minded, they'll accept it and they'll study with Paul to see where are you going with this and why is that. So go ahead, Cindy.
No, I think this passage is for us today.
Oh, most definitely.
Because Paul was doing his truth. And regardless of the opposition that you encounter, someone told me yesterday, all you can do is what you know is right. And when you speak what is right and you're true to yourself, that's all you can do. You cannot control other people and their behaviors and their beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such an important lesson for us today with what's going on everywhere.
Yeah.
That we can only continue to love and whether your neighbor is not. And so that's a really important lesson for us. I think this was meant for the world we're living in right now.
Right now, yeah. I think we the Christianity has gotten a little bit off track. I say a little bit off track. There's branches going everywhere right now, but we need to focus back on what's most important. And we put it in our pamphlets. We put it in everything. What's the most important thing? Love God and love your neighbor as yourself.
But
Those are
don't
the
concentrate on the contemporarism. If
Yeah.
other people will welcome you with open arms.
yes.
That's the focus.
Yes, it's about people. It's about people. It's not about making people do things. It's about loving people and having them come to that decision themselves. That's the important thing. Okay. Okay. So, at this point, it just ends.
Yeah.
That's it. The story ends.
The story was always over.
So it's like that's the end of Acts, and there seems like something. What happened at the trial? What happened here? What happened there? And some people say that at the end there, that's where we are. That's where he was when he was writing it. He come to that point, and he thought he was going to write more, but it never became. And so that's the end of Acts. Luke. And so that's the end. And we can see that Paul was definitely an apostle to the Gentiles. Any questions? Okay.
That's a great thing, yeah. That's a great story. Paul's been trying to convince some of them he doesn't convince them. He says, look, fellas, what's happening here is foretold in Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And everyone can rely on that.
100%.
All right. So next week, no Bible study.
No?
The following week, no Bible study. November, 6th? 5th. I forget what date it is. First Sunday. Second. Okay. November 2nd. We are going to start going over the book of Revelation. Tell everybody, because everybody always asks, "Oh, when are you going to study Revelation? When are we going to study Revelation?" It's like, well, we need to study other things first, but we'll go ahead and we'll look at the book of Revelation starting November 2nd.